So why do I say do not rely on your blood, but rely on your will? Well, there's a number of reasons why I say this, right? But I'm going to stick to just 5 reasons. Now, before we get into the conversation, so in most discussions that I have with a lot of people, there will always be someone, either in the comment section or in the engagement that we're having, that is going to say, I don't see why I need to have a will. What is this discussion about a will every day? Because automatically, me being the blood of my children, automatically everything that I have will go to them. So why are we having this discussion? Right, in case you're someone who's also asking that question, stick around. You'll understand why often it's not encouraged for you to rely on what? On blood. Instead, you must rely on your will. So let's not waste time. Let's get into the conversation. For the new folks in here, my name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. I'm an attorney and I specialize mainly in estate planning and trust and other things as well. So welcome, stay. In fact, we know you're going to stay because these conversations are for all of us. So let's start the conversation. So why then do I say, do not rely on your blood, but rather rely on your will? Well, the first reason why I say this is not ideal is because even though your kids will most probably benefit from you if you have only your children, you are not married, the other problem your kids will have, particularly if they're married, is that that particular property or properties they may inherit from you may end up forming part of the marriages that they are in. Let me explain this. So we leave these properties without saying anything. So if a child is married in community of property, automatically when they inherit the property you have left for them, automatically it also belongs to the joint estate, which means that their spouse as well has a right to that property. So in essence, what you have now done is that the property you have left has now been extended to other additional people who have a right to such property. That then creates a complication for your family, particularly if it comes to a point where those kids or that particular child that is married divorces. Now, that property has to also be counted as that of the joint estate, or the partial, inheritance of that child also has to now be looked at as part of the joint estate. Is this not a disadvantage? How would a will have done away with this? If you had drafted a will and have stated your instructions, still stated the same things, that your kids must inherit, you would have had an opportunity to put in a clause to say, even though my kids will be inheriting these properties, right, or my adult children will be inheriting these properties or whatever it is they are inheriting from me must not form part of their marriage. In that way, that which you have left will never form part of their current marriages or their future one, because you have stated it clearly that such inheritance must not be there. So that's what a will does for what? For your family. Let's go to the second thing. Another instance where I say do not even try to rely on blood is when you are raising, let's say, a family member's child who doesn't have a parent or whose parent is just not up for it, right? And so you take over as the parent and you raise this child as your own. And in some instances, some of you will even foster those kids. Now, most people tend to have the idea that when it comes to those kids automatically will inherit from them because they were, in a sense, their parents, even though they were never really biologically theirs. But by virtue of the blood and by virtue of the fact that they take care of them, they should be regarded as their parents. But in terms of the law, is that the case? It definitely isn't. Which means what? Which means that if you were to pass away today and you only were raising kids that were not biologically yours, and you never had or done a legal adoption on those children, it means that somebody else in your family will inherit everything you have and those kids will inherit nothing. I don't know how many cases I have come across where kids are being kicked out of a property because the person who was looking after them, that family member who had taken them as their children, is now no more, and everything has to be going to who? To another family member, because those are not his or her kids. And now whoever is inheriting is saying, go to where you will find refuge. This is my property. Do you see why I say blood will not necessarily help you in most instances, but a will help you? For instance, in this instance, how would a will help you? It will help you in a sense that you will clarify that you want those kids, so and so and so and so, to inherit from your property outright. And no one can go above and beyond your instructions, which means you have secured a home for those kids, which means you have secured a roof over those kids, their heads, right? So think about these things before you say blood will help you, because in most instances, blood will not take care of such problems. Now, let's go to the third reason why I say blood will not necessarily help, but a will definitely will. Now, the third reason why I say do not rely on blood, but rather rely on your will and your own instructions, is because you get an opportunity when you draft the will to state who is going to be your executor. Listen, when you don't have a will, right, you pass away. First thing that now has to be established, in the family, somebody has to be appointed as an executor. That's the first squabble the family has. I want to be an executor. No, I want to be an executor. No, I want to be. And then people don't agree. You will find that there's people that take out letters of executorship fraudulently so at the master's office. You'll find that another person went to try and also get letters of executorship or authority. It will be a mess. When a family comes together and chooses an executor, we always say, this is such a peaceful family. But you'll find that in some families, they don't want to come to an agreement. And this derails everything, because nothing can happen without letters of executorship. For instance, properties cannot be transferred. Monies cannot be claimed, right? Because now everything is stuck. Because why? Because people want this this role of being the executor, because everybody is obsessed about power. So if you had drafted a will, you would have easily named your own executor amongst your family members. And this would not even be up for questioning, because that person would be the one in charge of the whole, estate administration. But now, because you said, no, everything is going to my blood, your blood is fighting because your blood is not in agreement. But if you had left those instructions, things would have been quicker and easier. People would not have to fight. There are instances where people would say, if I'm not nominated as an executor, rather that whole administration fail, rather the money's not come out, rather nothing happens. There are people who get to that, and you'd find that now families have to go to court to try and fight this out, because the office of the master can't just simply ignore a person who's supposed to also form part of the people who are nominating an executor. So now it ends up being a nasty, dramatic issue that has to go to court, which could have been resolved by what? By you drafting a will. Then that issue would have been resolved easily. There wouldn't be an issue in the first place. Let's go to the fourth thing. Now, the fourth reason why I say rely on your instructions and not your blood is because if you rely on your instructions, they will work best for your family member or the family that you're leaving behind. Remember, sometimes we pass away when our children are still minors. We don't plan this. It's because of some events. Sometimes it's just natural causes or sicknesses, etc. Now, if you're saying you're not going to write up a will, it means that you're also not going to choose who's going to look after your kids. So which means that in most instances, the person or the first person that puts their hand up to say, I'm going to take care of those kids and takes over everything, is unfortunately going to be the person that's going to look after your kids, because you never said anything about this particular aspect. And in some instances, if you hear the stories of the people who were raised by such people who often put their hand up, they will not have had a very good experience being raised under those particular persons, because they were, number one, they were not used to them. And number two, the way in which they raised them was not ideal for them, having been raised by someone like you, right? So when you don't draft a will, that's exactly what you do. You're saying that they must choose everything. People who want to raise my kids will just appoint themselves. They can put their hand up, and if the court says yes, it's fine. But if you had drafted a will, you would have had an opportunity to say, my wish is that my kids be raised by my sister. My kids are to be raised by my mother if I were to die and they are still minors. And that would have played a significant role, right? Especially if that person is fit and proper, because the court would have said, obviously you knew what you were doing, and this person has the capability, and they are fit and proper, and it's the best interest that those kids actually remain with the person you have nominated. But now when you don't say anything, you leave that decision to other people. Is it good, or is it a good idea for you to do that? Let's go to the last thing. And then the last reason why I say do not rely on blood. Rely on your own instructions, which you're going to note in your will, is because if you are too much reliant on your blood, there's a lot that will go wrong. There's monies that will be lost. And I'll tell you why. When you don't go draft the will, you automatically will not go through an estate planning session in most instances. Because you're sitting there and you're thinking, it doesn't matter. If I die, who is my blood will get what they want to get or need to get, and then it will be sorted, or it will be settled. But what you don't understand is that you're missing out on a great opportunity to understand your current circumstances and to plan in accordance if you attempt to draft the will. For example, when you're drafting a will with us, one of the first things we love to do is to say, let's first understand your circumstances so that we can give you advice of some of the things that you need to put in place in order for this will to really be beneficial to your family. For example, a lot of people don't think about the fact that they still have debts of different kinds. And in most instances, when they don't have a will, they die and leave all of these debts outstanding and all of these issues. And now when it's time for the kids to inherit, the money suddenly is this much, because most of it has had to go to debt, has had to go to taxes, has had to go to this and that, because they never sat down with someone to understand their circumstances and then draft a will to express their wishes. Then what happens? Kids often will inherit next to nothing. Or sometimes there's going to be a loss of properties. It happens all the time, and people don't understand. It's because you don't take the necessary steps, which is why I say, even when you're going to draft the will, the person who you're talking to, ask them to first an estate planning session. If they don't talk about it, that's a red flag for me, because in most instances, people will draft wills and then the financial circumstances and your overall estate is in shambles, which then sabotages the whole thing you've written in your will. And there's a video here that I've done which speaks to this and the importance of doing the estate planning just when you're about to draft the will, so that these things speak together, because you need to look at your holistic self. Really, are you an asset when you pass away? Are you going to be beneficial? Are those things you've worked for going to still survive and exist when you're not there? And those conversations you will only have if you attempt to draft a will. Hence, I say, You should not rely on blood and have this, thinking that going for a will is just a waste of money and time. In fact, it will save your family a lot of stress. It will save them money, and it will save them the time, going up and down trying to, resolve all of these issues that they may have if you just die without a will. So those were just a few things that I just wanted you to just note could be problematic if you decide to just pass away and don't draft the will. How and where you draft the will is another story now. And what you need to include, that's also another story. But you can also look through our videos here. We do talk about some of the things that you may consider when you're going to draft a will, right? What you need to probably be thinking about, how you need to leave your property, the options that are available to you. So there's a particular playlist that says estate planning and inheritance, very useful in this regard. So this brings us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you for listening. Listen, if you find this video helpful, useful, share it with another person. Like, subscribe, come back. We'll see you next time.